What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Pod Scum. I'm your host, your bastard of ceremonies, Reckless Rexx Ruger. And if you couldn't tell by those immense chompers back there, that's my sidekick, the Freddie Mercury puppet. We're getting down to the brass tacks. My guest is already here, so we're getting down to business and chopping it up immediately. No lines, no waiting. Let's get down to it. Jeff, he's sideways. There he is. Jeff.
What's up, man?
Hey, man. First of all, man, thanks for doing this, man. It's a real pleasure to meet you, man.
Well, really great to meet you. Hang on, let me get all this stuff out of here.
Yeah, please. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What's happening, dude?
Take your time. Are you now? Are you taking a moment to admire the David Lee Roth coif?
Is that a David Lee Roth coif?
That is a David Lee Roth coif. Yes, because and DNA testing will prove it this year. You are looking at Diamond David Lee Roth Jr. That is.
So, what are you talking about? Really?
Yeah, no. Well, yeah. Hey, listen, I would love a little bit of that. I would love a little taste of that Panama money, though, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you serious, dude?
Well, it's not the real. Jeff, you're already making me, it's already a bloodletting, man. You're already making me confess to stuff I don't want to confess to, man. But allegedly, I mean, at least you should be able to tell, and I may subpoena you on this, at the very least quote you, man. But you can tell that I look like David Lee Roth Jr., right?
Yeah. You look exactly like David Lee Roth Jr. It's weird.
That I will quote you on. Yeah, that I will quote you on. Hey, listen, man, but it's in all seriousness, man, it really is a pleasure to have you on here. And when I start these things, I usually kind of go back to the beginning, man. So with someone with your musical background, was there a specific album or an artist or a song even that really got its hooks in you and really lit the fire for you to do music?
When I was a young lad?
When you were a youngster, yeah.
Oh man, there was a lot actually. There's a lot that went into that. But yes, there's I could pinpoint it to 3 events.
Okay.
The first of which, let's see, I don't know my exact age, but I was quite young. They used to sell records and 8-tracks at the grocery store. I'm from Alaska.
Yeah, kids might be going to Google what an 8-track is right now. I don't know. They
kind of sucked, man.
Yeah.
But my dad had this big big yellow Chrysler 8-track. Went to the grocery store. He bought Phases and Stages by Willie Nelson.
Okay.
And I'd never really paid attention to anything, but I was just a kid. I like cartoons and nursery rhymes and things like this. All I heard. Yeah. And I don't know if you're familiar with this record, but it's real cool. It's like, in retro, as I got older, I figured it all out. It's a Muscle Shoals record. It's the Muscle Shoals guys. So it's real funky. The band on it is amazing. But he put this in on the way home, and I was absolutely changed forever. It changed my life, man.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what is happening? Yeah. And I never really, like I said, I just heard like whatever was on Sesame Street or something.
Right.
And it just freaked me out. And I thought Willie was the only guy that did anything like that. Yeah. So that was a big one. Phases and Stages. I was probably like 3 or 4, if I were to guess.
Yeah.
So that was a big one. And I got way into music after that. And like music, like because of Willie Nelson, I got into Ray Charles and all that. I'm listening to Ray Charles when I'm like 5 and 6.
Now, do you feel like your environment, because you did grow up in Alaska, which I don't know how secluded Alaska is because I've never been there, man. But did it kind of breed like this, this wanting and this yearning to be creative? Like, was there other shit to do?
Yeah, I have 3 older brothers. My mom and dad, same parents. They waited 13 years to have me.
Yeah.
And then I have a younger sister, so we have kind of like 2 separate sets of kids.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, there was these 3 teenagers around, that had muscle cars and awesome record collections.
Yeah.
And 2 of them played guitar. So, my brother Brian had a Les Paul Gold Top, like a 71 Deluxe Les Paul,
Yeah.
And so all of those things I just thought were so cool. I thought my brothers were so cool.
Yeah.
And then, which leads kind of to the second one, I would go and just pick out a record. I would sneak in my brother's room and just blindly pick a record. And it happened to be Johnny Winter and Live. So he called the band right?
Yeah.
And Johnny Winter and live. It's a very specific record. It's got Rick Derringer on second guitar, and that blew me away. I just listened to it over and over and over and over and over, and I didn't really know anything about any of these guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was all this slide guitar. It was the first time I heard proper slide guitar. And again, I was like 7 or 8.
Yeah. And now, did your brothers get into music? Because even though they had the guitars before you, did any of them segue into a musical career?
Not really a career. My brother Brian went the furthest, but it was just like kicking around Alaska, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Weed was legal back then.
In Alaska?
In Alaska, like in the 80s.
So really, you could say like Alaska, in some respects, was ahead of its time.
I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
You could also say it was way behind the times. It was like, it's still kind of like that. It's just kind of stuck in 1974.
Yeah.
Which was oddly the year I was born. But it's cool, you know. It was very, very chill, you know, in a very like just cool place, you know. And then so
at what age do you migrate to Washington?
When I was 12 or 13, actually. And I had already been, so I started playing guitar when I was 9, and I had all these sort of influences, a lot of country music, and then my brothers with the rock music, well into the Stones.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jeff Rittal, and I just would kind of just take their records, and I ended up with a bunch of those records. By the time I was 15, I had, you know, 600 vinyl albums, you know, to haul around everywhere I went. You know what I mean?
Well, perhaps maybe you can shed some light on this, because you did get down to the Washington State pretty young in life. You know, when, and for lack of a better term, I'll use the vernacular grunge, because people that are listening are familiar with it. But I feel like, and I've had other musicians on here. I've had Kevin Wood from Malfunction. I've had Larry Schemmel on. I mean, but people that were around that scene. But that scene didn't just all of a sudden happen, right? I imagine there must have been talented people around there, and suddenly the microscope just happened to shift there between like 1990 and 1996. But it wasn't just like it wasn't just lightning in a bottle, right? I imagine that area was probably always a hotbed for extremely talented people.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in Seattle, all the way back to the 50s and 60s, actually.
Yeah.
If you look into it. But for me, I moved in that, so that was 88. I'm getting pretty old, man.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So, you know, and that was all happening. And there was this, so back then, we didn't really have cable TV. It was available, but we didn't really have it, you know, in Alaska. At least my family didn't have it, you know. So we had the regular channels, and then there was UHF, which was channel 0, and then the other dial, right?
Yeah.
There was all kinds of cool shit on there on Alaska TV. And one of the things was called Bomb Shelter Videos. Which I think was actually done in Anchorage. And then as I moved to Washington, he also moved the show. I always thought up until recently that this show was out of Seattle, and we just got it in Alaska.
Right.
But I think he was actually in Anchorage. But anyway, this guy Billboard, and he'd play punk rock videos.
Okay.
And this is where I got introduced to, you know, Minor Threat and Bad Brains and the Misfits, all of that stuff. You know?
Yeah.
It was pretty rad, and you had to stay up late, you know, and get the channel, and kind of like move the antennas around or whatever. You know what I mean? And, before we left, it was 80. It must have been 87 or maybe early in 88. They played "Hands All Over" by Soundgarden on that show.
Yeah.
Which was an outlier for the rest of the stuff they were playing on there. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That was the coolest shit up until that point I had ever seen. I don't know if you remember that video.
Yeah. Oh, man.
But imagine seeing Soundgarden for the very first time at like 11 years old.
Yeah.
And just being like, holy shit. It was everything I liked all in one thing. And so I was also into freestyle biking.
Okay.
Like, we almost moved to LA. But last minute we moved to Seattle, and I found out that these guys were from there. And so I came to Seattle in the late 80s knowing about all this stuff, because I kind of, you know, I was so into music that any sort of research I would do.
Yeah.
You know, and they were pretty underground at that point. So you really had to kind of dig deep. You know, fanzines, and, you know, there's no, I hate when people say there's no internet. But there was no internet. So
there was no, there was.
So I knew about Mother Love Bone and Malfunction and Had and a little later on Nirvana. I wish I would have seen. I never got to see Nirvana even when they were big. Yeah. But I remember they would play some all ages shows when I was like in junior high around town, and I wanted to go, and for whatever reason it just didn't happen. But I was well into that stuff kind of before it broke. And I remember when I don't know if it was like the debut or whatever, but I remember seeing Teen Spirit on MTV.
Oh yeah, you couldn't go anywhere and not see it.
Well, I remember seeing it for the first time.
Right.
And being like, oh shit, I knew it. I knew what
game changer.
Because everything was so goofy, at that point, besides Guns.
Yeah.
Everything was so corny. It got really bad right there towards the end with the bands that were just coming out.
Yeah.
Out of the hair metal thing. I mean, it got corny as hell. And I remember with the cheerleaders with the pom-poms and the tattoos and the anarchy symbol and shit. I was like, this is it, man. This is gonna do it. And sure enough, I was right. I didn't know it was gonna be that big.
Yeah.
But that happened in the summer in between my junior and sophomore year. And sophomore year, because I was kind of like, banished to be a misfit in in that first year of high school.
It was already predetermined.
I was the coolest kid in town, man. Come that next year, dude. Because I had a real Les Paul, you know what I mean? My hair was all long. Everybody thought I looked like Eddie Vedder already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was those were good times right there. Yeah. So my senior year in high school was 93, which was, a lot of, could be the pinnacle of that stuff.
That was right in the thick of it. Yeah, that was right in the thick of it. And I got so much stuff I want to ask you about, but I first want to just head it off because people that watch this podcast certainly know that I have a healthy or maybe an unhealthy obsession with all things Mark Lanegan, a guy that you work very closely with, man. So maybe maybe take this time here in the podcast to maybe share like how you linked up with him and what it was like working with him, because I love just hearing stories about him, man. I mean, I've literally absorbed Sing Backwards and Weep, his memoir. I have the audio version, which is great that he narrates it himself. So we kind of always have a piece of Mark Lanegan, aside from the music. I mean, you know what I mean? So, so how did you link up with him? In my mind, really, really up here for me.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I have so many stories and memories and recollections, and they put a lot of miles on with that guy. And let's see, how do we start this? What
do you mean a Mark Lanegan? Where do you meet a Mark Lanegan?
Where do you meet a Mark Lanegan? Not here, not in Seattle. It had nothing to do with Seattle. It was very odd, the roundabout way that this all came about. Let's see. I bought the first Isabel Campbell Mark Lanegan record when it came out. With a stack of CDs. I used to go buy records in kind of bulk,
and
that was one of them. And so I was aware of that project, and I thought it was so gorgeous. And that was the only thing I knew about Mark outside of the Trees. And the Trees I hadn't really messed around with for years at that point. This was 2009, I want to say. And but I was aware of that record. And then I was aware of, I love the Queens of the Stone Age and stuff. And I really dug. And then obviously Mad Season was a big deal, a huge deal for me. Me too. At that point, So anyway, blah, 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 blah. Playing guitar. It's not really going all that well. You know what I mean? I got nothing going on. I'm working in restaurant after restaurant, working the service industry, bartending, and every gig you could imagine in a restaurant, and just not knowing exactly how this was all going to go, and kind of feeling a little bit disheartened at that point in my life. And there was a friend of mine's good guitar player that lived here. His name was Phil Hurley. Lived in Seattle, moved away. I can't remember. He moved so many different places, but I'm pretty sure he was in LA at this point. And he started a band, and he was at this thing called Folk Alliance, which is like a conference, like a musical conference, and they hotel rooms, and there's little gigs in each hotel room, and then the big gigs are in the sort of the ballrooms downstairs and whatnot. And this was in Memphis, and his band was headlining one of those shows, one of those like, bigger shows. And Isabel Campbell had flown to this thing to meet American musicians because she wanted to tour the US. She didn't necessarily want to use her normal Scottish guys.
Okay.
She saw Phil play in this big thing. She was keen on him, as she said.
Yeah.
And just went up to him and asked him if he was into playing with her and Mark. And they wanted to do a tour of the US. They hadn't done that yet, I guess. And he was like, no, I got this thing going on, but there's a guy in Seattle that would be great. And then he called me. He goes, hey, I just talked to Isabel Campbell. I don't know if you know who that is. I'm like, no shit.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, because I had never done anything like major at all. Like never traveled very much. Did some van touring, but it was a slog. I didn't really like it much,
Yeah, sure.
And anyway, it was about he told me about that. He said, I gave her your phone number. I didn't even have a computer back then. And about a month later, I kind of forgot about it. And I get this weird number on my flip phone, and I answer it. And it sounds like it's from 100,000 miles away. Oh, is this Jeff? And it was Isabel Campbell on the other line. And she told me she was flying out and she was going to do some recording with Calexico which I guess she met at this conference or whatever. This is a long story, but that's how I met Isabel. She flew me to Tucson, Arizona, where we ended up recording, and I ended up playing. And that was kind of my audition, really, was playing with Calexico and Isabel.
Right.
And it was a big deal. And I was ready. This was one of those things where it was like preparation meets opportunity, kind of whatever. You know what I mean? Say yes and all that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was ready to go. And when I was playing with those guys, it sounded awesome. And everybody was like, oh, this is fucking great. And then she wanted me to come and be her sort of musical guy because she didn't really play instruments and whatnot. And she wanted to make the record in LA because she had always done the recording of these. There was 2 other ones with Mark. She had always done the recording in Scotland, and then she'd send it to Mark, and then he would put on his vocals and sing it,
Right.
And she wanted to actually be in the same room with them. So we worked on the material of Hawk for about 2 weeks, and we just kind of flushed out the songs. And it was me and her and an engineer in Los Angeles. And on the next week, the second week, Mark came in, And I met Mark Lanegan, which was terrifying, really.
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of
in the room. Yeah. He came in the room. He's lumbering, and I'm all eager. Put up my hand. Hey, hi, I'm Jeff. And went to shake his hand. He just looks at me, and he looks at Isabel. Come here. Takes her in the back room. I could totally hear him talking. Who the fuck is this guy, man?
Yeah.
We're regular dudes. I don't know. This Jeff is great. I don't know, man.
Surely.
So anyways, we made half that record with just the 3 of us in a room. And then it was all to a click track. And I was the only musician. So that was my first real encounter with Mark, was singing with him and Isabel on that record with them on either side of me. It wasn't like isolated booths or anything like that. It was just super quiet music. And I just played acoustic guitar. And then they ended up making the record out of that, like just filling it out, putting the drums on later and all that stuff.
And so when do you kind of get Mark Lanegan acceptance, man? Like, does he see you play and then kind of like he kind of lets his guard down? He's not so surly.
Well, I don't know about all that, but we made the record. I got an email afterwards, that saying like, we'd like you to be in the touring band. And I got this list of dates. It blew my mind, man. Blew my mind. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Right. So again, long story, just short as I can, went on the tour, and it was all in Europe. It was all over Europe.
Yeah.
And I'd never been anywhere. And now all of a sudden we're going everywhere, every major city, all across Europe, Eastern Europe, everywhere. I was blown away. All the UK. I think the rehearsals were in Scotland. And so anyway, I got to know the band, blah, blah, blah. It went very well. The band was very good. Mark didn't really speak to anybody much unless he didn't like something. Right? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
As this kind of continued, I realized that this was a side project, and this was their 3rd record, and this wasn't going to last. Right. And I really got keen on touring. I quite liked it.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, this is where I need to be. And I was like, I gotta work on Lanegan. I didn't know how else to do it.
Yeah,
but I was
chip
like,
away.
I need to be hanging with that guy. And it wasn't until we kind of dropped the band. We did a tour of Scandinavia with just me and an upright bass player, and there was like these stripped down shows. They were really, really great shows, and that's when I got him. You know, and it was like the second to last, almost the last show, like the second to last show. And he came backstage and he's like, "Hey man, let me get your number. I might have some work for you from time to time." And I was like, "Fucking motherfucker." And then we got home, and then the next week he asked me to do the West Coast tour with just me and him. And that was where that all started. And that was 2012.
Yeah. I get the
feeling
then
we started the 2-piece thing, which lasted all the way up.
I get the feeling that it is tough to warm up to him, because I had Alan Johannes on here, and he kind of said the same thing, that when he first met him, he was in a room. I'm paraphrasing it best here. I'd have to go back and watch the episode, but Alan was in there maybe at the soundboard doing his thing or whatever, and he said, someone turned around and introduced him to Lanegan, and suddenly he just turned around and kind of sees this half face in the doorway. You know what I mean? It seems like he kind of approached everybody, man, like with a little bit of trepidation maybe, until he warmed up to you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, even then, it took years for me and him to like really, I don't know what warming up. He's a different kind of dude. He's the one of a kind. That is for sure. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's tricky. It's tricky getting to know him, and because he is in character. I want to say, you know what I mean.
He is who he is. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of like, once I did sort of. We could be comfortable enough to kind of talk and joke around, because he was super funny. And once he kind of let you know how funny he was, that's when it was like, okay, I get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I remember this might be like pulling the curtain back a little too much, but like I remember we were talking and we were really laughing about something, and somebody walked in and he hits me on the shoulder, and he just goes back to kind of like,
yeah.
Like, shut up, man. Nobody needs to see this,
Yeah.
And he would actually say right before we go on stage, he's like, "I got to get in the fucking character, man. Shut the fuck up."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it was the thing, it was like,
right.
Very stoic. He had to be in that place. And it was a pretty dark place. I remember him once, we were making a set list, because we would write the set list together. And they were relatively long. And I was like, he's like, "You do it, man. I don't want to do it." It was just one. And I put all these songs in a row. And he goes, "We can't put these together. They're all about the same thing." With my demise. And then he was like, "Oh, fuck."
His demise. Which obviously, here we are laughing about him making a comment, but then unfortunately in 2022 we do lose him, man. How do you find out?
Mark Pickerel called me early in the morning.
Okay.
When he had COVID, which I'm sure you know that whole story a little bit.
Yeah.
The Devil in a Coma.
Yep. You wrote a book about it. Yep.
Yeah. So when that happened, I was part of there was probably 7 people on the planet that knew about that.
Yeah.
We would get sort of updates. And we, explicitly forbidden telling anybody about it. But me and Pickerel are close friends. He was the drummer in Screaming Trees, of course.
Yep.
He goes way back with Mark. Grew up with him in Ellensburg and all that. So anyway, we were kind of part of that whole group. And then when Mark died, I got the call from Pickerel early in the morning, and we didn't talk. I was like, I knew something was up because it was early. It was like 8:30, which is,
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm like, "Hello," and he goes, "He's gone, man."
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And that was all we said. And I hung up, and I actually called Isabel Campbell. So I told her.
Yeah.
And then just sat around. I had some work to do down here. And everything was pretty chill until about 2 p.m. And then my phone just started blowing up.
Yeah.
It hit social media or whatever.
Yeah.
And there it was, Yeah. So it was pretty heavy.
Well, to change lanes a little bit, because you are a songwriter, and I appreciate you sharing stuff about Mark and everything like that. But I'm curious, man, when you write songs, and you've collaborated with a lot of people, I guess there's kind of two parts to this question. But first of all, what are the ingredients, or like, what's the formula in your mind for writing a great song? Like, what typically comes to you first? Is it a title? Is it a riff? Is it an opening line? Or is it different every time?
Well, I have to say that I have written songs in my life. Yeah. I have, but I don't consider myself a songwriter because, first and foremost, I've been lucky enough to work with some of the most extraordinary songwriters that have ever lived. I don't know how that happened, but some just unbelievably talented lyricists and chordsmiths.
Yeah.
I learned a lot, so I consider myself a bit more of a collaborator. I'm good with bridges. I'm good with harmony and counter melody. And so for me, it's all about the collaboration. That's where I feel like I really, thrive in that, as far as whatever talents I might have, aside from being a guitarist. I think that because generally if I work with somebody, it's not like I'm hired to. I have done that, but it's kind of rare where I just get hired to play guitar. That's kind of my just role. I'm generally sort of working in the band and helping with arrangements and things like that. Speaking for the songwriters, as far as that question goes, in my experience, the really good ones are a different breed of people, sort of in a way. It's almost like they have to do this.
Right.
And whether the lyrics or the music comes first, it's almost irrelevant. It just kind of happens. And sometimes organic. It happens this way. You know what I mean? There's a few songwriters I know that like, I'm going to sit down and write a song. But generally, these, like, it just kind of comes to them in some sort of dream. Almost.
Organically.
It's very, and then it's refined. That's right. And that's kind of where the work comes. But the genesis from these things, as far as I can tell, is some sort of divine gift. It really is for some of these people. And then other times it's just really hard work. Because it's like, what is that lyric? And like we're really working out, the structures and the subject matters. I always find that fascinating, to where it's like, the best songs, I think, you don't really know what they're about.
Right. Obviously, you didn't know most of Mark's material is about his demise.
Well, yes and no.
But so at one point, and when I was putting together bullet points, stuff to talk to you about or whatever, I saw a quote that I believe came from you. And I'm curious if you could shed some light on what you mean by this when you referred to yourself as the Forrest Gump of rock.
Dude, I said that like in so passing, and then when I saw it in print or whatever, I was like,
it's taken on a life. It's taken on a life.
God. Yeah. I think what I meant by that was that, like, in that movie when he just shows up, and he's hanging out with like Kennedy and shit.
Kind of like, right? Like he's kind of like
looking around like, how did I get here? And then he's
kind of like Johnny on the spot. Yeah.
That's kind of what I mean. I just kind of end up at things. Hey.
Johnny on the spot. Yeah.
I'm very, very fortunate in that way. What I mean? But it is funny. I just kind of tend to find myself in these situations, and I'm just kind of like, wow. What a trip. Hanging out with, like, there's just Soundgarden, just hanging around with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wow. And then the next week, I did this thing with Paul Allen for a while that I can't really talk about. I signed all these agreements. I wouldn't say anything, but I got to meet all these crazy people.
Yeah.
That were like, my absolute heroes, like Billy Gibbons and all this stuff. It's crazy.
For real. Yeah.
And sometimes, I had this great conversation with Quentin Tarantino one time. It was just wild. So when I look back at my life, I'm just kind of like, God, I got so many stories about all this stuff, and it's just kind of crazy, So I just like that thing we did with Mark with Anthony Bourdain.
Yes,
Somebody put that up recently. I hadn't seen it in a long time. I'm like, it's a really cool show. And I'm just like, wow, I can't even believe that's me. I'm never.
Now your career could have taken a different. Your career could have taken a different turn though, because I was reading though that you were kind of I don't know what age this would have been for you, but you were I don't know if you were going in the direction of, but creating art in a different way though. Like you were into drawing, painting.
Yeah. These drawings up here, I don't know if you can see them.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Mine on there. Yeah.
So it is still something that you actively do.
Well, I haven't had the time actually to do it in quite some time. I think my last real good drawing was in 2015. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
That's 10 years now, huh? Oh my gosh. So I should probably do it. It's very therapeutic, but I ended up becoming rather busy, and I got married and have a kid now. And
yeah, congratulations. Yeah,
thanks.
Great. Yeah.
But all these stories I have, my dream is, and I'll do it at some point, I swear to God, because my drawing style is in the sort of underground comic. That was what I was into when I was doing it, you know, R. Crumb and American Splendor and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And I was super inspired by all that, pen and ink, you know, and just sort of that kind of dirty cartoon fucking vibe. Yeah. So eventually, one of these days, my memoirs are going to be in the form of comics.
That's cool. Cool.
I just have to sit and do it, man. It takes a lot. You have to storyboard everything, and you got to really kind of take the time to do it, you know.
And so you are alluding to the fact that there might be a memoir in you, though, because you do have all these great stories, though. Is that an avenue that you would explore?
If I could, yeah, man. I mean, there's plenty of stuff. I mean, you know, who am I, right? But at the same time, like I said, I've crossed paths with so many luminaries.
Yeah.
That it's just unusual, you know. I think it's unusual.
Yeah.
So it's worth writing down. I don't know if anybody would care to see it, but just funny things, you know.
Now you do create music with your wife. I'm wondering what that dynamic is like, because I've been married for 26 years, man. I adhere to the happy wife, happy life. And so who kind of acquiesces to who in the creative process when you and your wife create? Is it very collaborative? Is someone kind of taking the reins? How does that dynamic work? Like when you're romantically involved and creatively involved?
Well, oddly enough, we're working on this right now. Like we just listened to some stuff I did. They're not mixes yet because we're just recording just now. But we met in the beginning of 2015 again. Maybe that was oddly my last drawing. Huh?
Yeah.
And then she was a musician. I went saw her play a couple times, and I was like really impressed. She's an amazing singer, really amazing vocalist. Yeah. But I had never really been in a relationship with somebody else that was that did music or was an artist really at all. And so at the time, I'm like, I really want to keep it separate because it felt like a conflict of interest or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just you do that thing, and I'll do this thing, and it'll all be great, you know. And it wasn't, but 4 months of us seeing each other that, I was like, I got a couple ideas, and then within that year we made the first record we did together, which I think is a phenomenal record.
It is. Yeah.
It's called The Curtain Falls. I really like that record a lot. I was getting into different things. Like it sounds like electronic music, but I was inspired by like early electronic music, like these analog drum machines with these primitive ways to link them together. So all the drum machine stuff on that is like real old machines. I have them all over here that you can link together by these odd cables.
That's cool.
It's like predates MIDI. And I was like learning about all this stuff. So at the same time, I was like, well, since I'm learning about it, I'm fascinated by it. So let's make a whole record with all this stuff involved,
Yeah.
And all these sequences and stuff like that. I had never done anything really like that before.
Well, obviously a lot of those guys took chances though. Cause I mean, even when you think about like someone like Chris Cornell, it took a big chance when he did that album with Timberland, or even later in Mark's career, the stuff that he did on like The Winding Sheet or Whiskey for the Holy Ghost was very different. He started to add a lot more electronic elements as his solo career progressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mark was heading in the direction of becoming completely bandless. I think that was his goal.
Just downside
machines play his music,
Yeah.
Talk back, and but the thing about Mark with all that is fascinating, and something I learned from a lot was he never wanted to look back. And I don't know if that was a thing about being kind of sort of bitter about the past and the trees and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And Seattle and all the bad things that happened, that he talks about in the book.
Sure.
I think that had something to do with it because he never wanted to talk about that stuff,
Yeah.
In fact, I was surprised when he started writing that book because he never wanted to talk about the past, really, unless it was some funny story.
Yeah. Well, I saw him on a podcast with Joseph Arthur, and he did say that it was very difficult, man, to go back and like write the book, and he described it as just trying to get through the process. Still be honest, still be candid, but just kind of get through it as fast as possible. You know what I mean? Because it did seem like revisiting a lot of that stuff was painful.
It was, and we were with him that whole time because we toured relentless, man, in that band. Yeah. Relentless, and it was old school, shitty, but like it was fine, but it was pretty, pretty gnarly, and then he was writing that book that whole time,
Yeah.
And so he had started smoking again,
which
put him like we never really saw him a lot, and then when he started smoking again, he was always around because he smoked with fellas, you know what I mean? And just telling these stories. And that was his process of getting through the thing. So we relived a lot of his past when he was writing that book, just because of, the way his process sort of, which was just relaying these things. I'm just like, oh. and
it does seem unfortunate because in the book, I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but in the book, he doesn't really, you're right, he doesn't really look back with any fondness of his work. He seems to kind of impugn the work that he did with the Screaming Trees and almost not be very proud of it. And I'm not really sure why, because I mean, it certainly, gets plenty of accolades. A lot of those albums are very acclaimed, especially that Sweet Oblivion album in 1992. I think that was really where they really hit their peak or whatever. But a lot of those albums are really, really great. But Mark seems to kind of almost like poo-poo that period of his life,
Well, his whole thing was forward thinking, and that has a lot to do with the electronic elements of the music too, because we played that with him, and there's a lot of loops and a lot of sequences and stuff like that we had to be very aware of, and like programming this kind of stuff, and it's interesting being in a band like that. The thing is in Europe he was considered a modern relevant artist,
right?
Frankly, in the U.S., it was all people wanted to hear the trees and
which
all that
sucks
stuff
for
like
us. Yeah, right. Which
and
sucks.
Really,
I had that conversation with Helen
out.
Johannes too. It really sucks for us American fans because you're right. He described it as being more viable over in Europe.
Yeah. So we would spend 3-4 months in Europe and a week and a half in the States.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We hit every single market. At least we tour Europe probably twice a year. But every other year, we'd go to Australia and Israel and Turkey and Greece. You know what I mean? We hit and all the way, played in Moscow twice.
Yeah.
And in all of those places, people want to hear the new record, which was the thing, And his books, were major big deals over there, because we were playing pretty big rooms, to people that really got it. And in the States, it was kind of a lot of the big man.
Yeah. I mean, why is that?
Really
Can you put a finger? I mean, are you able to put a finger on why that is, though? I mean, why does the European audiences, why does the newer stuff seem to resonate in the American audiences? Do you have a theory on that? Why the American audiences seem to be stuck in a time
it's always
warp?
been like that. If it wasn't for the British invasion, blues music would have been a side note that everybody forgot about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It took the Europeans taking that stuff and appreciating it for what it is. For whatever America doesn't appreciate itself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know what it is. Well, it's not that. We're awesome, but we don't appreciate how awesome we are.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like bad or whatever, you know what I mean? But
we suck. So
it kind of takes like Americana music, right? Like sort of like country Americana type music is huge all over Europe, especially in Australia. Oh my God. You know what I mean? And it's a big deal here in certain circles, you know what I mean? But they love American music over there. And they're quiet, they'll listen to, and I don't know. It's a different sort of, I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
It's still like that too. We were just there. And it was awesome.
Obviously, touring though, man, you have to live kind of like a nomad, like you just described. Sometimes being in vans, sometimes being in buses. I imagine that type of lifestyle. Like while it can be certainly romanticized, it could probably, if you're out there for too long, also become very tedious and almost break your spirit maybe at times. I don't know, but I know it's a big part of the business though. Do you like that part of the business? Are you one of those guys that loves hitting the road and being out there in the thick of it?
Yeah. Yeah. I am. But I mean, it's all things, it's not, it depends on the tour. But with Mark's thing, the life, it was pretty hard knock. The thing about it, that the crew, the band and the merch person and our tour manager and even the bus drivers would be kind of the same a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And it was really a really tight-knit family. And, and I'm over there, at least like those guys would get to go home when we would tour through Belgium or whatever it was.
Right.
I would just be gone, what I mean?
Right.
Million miles anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it did become pretty tedious, but I remember just being sort of proud of us because we were so old school. We played these festivals. We did the festivals every year.
Yeah.
Some pretty big ones, and it got to that point where, a lot of bands were using, there was no amps on stage, it's all modelers.
Right.
There's no monitors on stage. Everybody's in ears, you know what I mean? And it's weird. You watch the side of from the side of the stage and you can't hear anything except the cymbals, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's trip, right. I'm just like, what? And then I remember we were watching this band. It was like that. And they were cool, but and then I remember us rolling our beat up Tolex falling off our Marshall cabinets, rolling them out there.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a crew. We had to do our own
right
cables and load out and all that shit.
Yeah.
And everybody else had these elaborate crews. Every single other band.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, man, fuck yeah. I thought that was cool. You know what I mean?
Right. Keeping it kind of old school and Spartan. Yeah. That's kind of, that is cool.
And we had the best singer. We just had the coolest singer, even though he was a pain in the ass and whatever it was, you know what I mean? He could be very difficult to work with and stuff.
Sure.
But every time we played, if it was cracking, it was just like, we got the this is cool. This band, we were cool. You know what I mean? You couldn't really deny that.
Without doubt. And I've also seen Mark talk about in interviews where he got to the point where I guess you would be the exception, but he was using a lot of European musicians.
It was all Europeans except for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. That comes to my, there was a point where the band and what I did with Mark was separate. We would do these kind of duo gigs or special type shows where it would be me and Mark and a string section.
Right.
Or just me and Mark and Fred, the bass player. I knew Fred really early on. He was the bass player in both things.
Yeah.
And then eventually Mark just asked me to be in the Mark Lanegan Band. That happened in 2015 as well.
Yeah.
So there was that time from 10 to 15 rather, where I was just working with Mark in separate deals. And then come 15, I was doing everything with him up until their last tour in 2019.
Yeah.
And I was in the band that whole time. Yeah.
And obviously, I don't need to tell you, but the industry has changed so much. And especially post-COVID, we started to see a lot of bands really releasing music differently again. It went back to kind of being, attention spans have dwindled. It's gone back to being a lot of singles, a lot of EPs. Is there a right or wrong answer to how to release music now? Does an LP still make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I've turned the corner now. I still play with relatively young people, especially Nashville kind of stuff, where people are sort of in their early 20s and stuff like that. I played with Zach Bryan. I didn't even know who he was when we were doing some stuff. I was on the road. And that kind of thing. And I don't know. So then the stuff I do most of the time, like for instance, I know Tedeschi Trucks and Derek Trucks a little bit, right?
Yep.
And so that fan base tends to be a little older. And if they are younger, then they're into vinyl records and stuff like that. And they still buy albums.
Right.
You know, they just
Right.
do.
Right.
They'll buy CDs. You know what I mean?
Right. They'll still drop a needle on an album and let it play. Yeah.
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 Absolutely. So, you know, vinyl's like a thing. I think that is never going to really go away. I think there's always going to be a market for it for whatever reason, you know, whether it's kitschy or something like that.
Right.
You know, but I think that there'll always be a market for an actual physical copy. And at this point, a record is the only thing that really makes sense, which is great. I love that.
Yeah, me too.
But on the other hand, you know, it's a double-edged thing, you know, because like I said before, when I'd go to the record store and buy records in bulk, you know, couple vinyls, 4 or 5 CDs, you know what I mean?
Yep.
At what? When they stopped selling that kind of stuff, or they stopped being really readily available, what they were like $17, $18.
Yeah.
You know, records were probably $25, $30.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So you're spending all that bread, and then it's like, it means something, you know, you put it in the car. It's like, all right, now I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
You only hear the first single or whatever.
Yeah.
Listen to the record, you know, it's like means something, you know, where there's like, even now for me, it's like, oh, I want to hear that. I'll just dial it up, stream it on the, you know, you don't even have to hook a cable up anymore.
I know.
The thing. Oh, cool. You know, and it doesn't really have that. You didn't buy it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so it doesn't, I don't know. I listened to the new Michael Kimanaka record yesterday, and it's beautiful. It's really great. What a great album. I didn't even know it came out, you know. But there's something about unwrapping it, and something that you kind of purchased with your money that you worked for, you know, that is lost. And I don't see that ever coming back. Why would anybody buy anything again, you know? Yeah, you're right. And so on one hand, and then I kind of miss music business. I kind of miss the way that records were mixed. You know, there seemed to be a sort of a lost art to it, you know? Yeah. On the other hand, it's cool that you get to release music without a label, be taken seriously. You know, there's somewhere for it to go, whether that's, you know, whatever platform. All the platforms are sort of the same now. Yeah. You know, and then you can, you know, what used to take thousands and thousands of dollars in studio time, if you just spend a few $1,000 and you kind of have the wherewithal to learn how to use this stuff, you can do it here instead. You know? Yeah. And so that's the trade-off, I guess, you know. So, and then I think I'm reluctant to say anything, but I think we're seeing a reckoning with celebrity culture. Oh yes, on a lot of levels. Oh yeah. So it's all very interesting. I think we're still sort of in the flux of it all, you know. Yeah. And then recently, I've noticed a major change in the way that social media is being dealt with. People are leaving Facebook. They are. And they are going to some other, whatever, Blue Sky. I don't even know really what it is. Yeah. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of people that are going to drop out. And then what? You know, I think that we're happen to be sort of in a time of reinvention, whether we realize it or not. And so I don't know how it's all going to go. I really don't.
But has technology
much rebellion against Spotify and stuff like that, you know, man, I think the model's going to change. I think that if somebody was really smart, they would come up with something right now that was like, oh, I don't know what it is, but you know, something that is like a bit more friendly to the artist and a bit less corporate. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah.
Well, granted, technology has had a big influence, man. But do you think sometimes, though, like, you know, when you're specifically talking about social media platforms and everything, though, you know, that it tends to be I kind of see a trend right now, especially like in the music world, where sometimes the most talented people aren't being recognized, but it seems like it's a lot on views and subscribers and like how many eyes are on you and how present you are on social media. And you might not even have to be the most talented person, but you just have to kind of like be out there and almost kind of like pimping yourself out and like, you know what I mean, like letting the world see you and where you're going and where you're eating and you know, all this stuff. And it seems like the higher your profile goes, it's almost like you're almost like deemed as important or talented in some way. Yeah, it's a bummer. It is. The coolest thing about, well, not the coolest thing, there's a lot of cool things, but like
somebody like David Bowie or Mark Bolan or Pink Floyd, you know what I mean? Nobody knew. They seemed like they came off a spaceship or something.
Right.
There was this mystery to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the records reflected that. So, you know what I mean? And then it's like, it like had this like mystique. You know, Led Zeppelin had this like, what do they live? They live in castles and shit.
Right,
you know what I mean? And Pink Floyd,
nobody know too much
who they were, what they looked like, or you know what I mean? And it was like this mystery to it. It was kind of important. It led to this sort of like, you know, the music was so good also. And it lent itself to all this mystery, you know? All that shit is fucking gone, man.
Yeah, do you think we have too much access? Do we have too much access now, man? Do we know too much about our artists now? Are we are able to find out too much stuff?
Well, I don't know. It's hard. It's so hard to say. I don't know. I don't want to see, like, I love My Morning Jacket, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to know what he had for breakfast or what he's doing, you know what I mean? And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What car he drives and shit like that. I don't care. I don't see how anybody would care about all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know? And so on that level, I guess it's still sort of, it's just so it's so vast. It's hard to, you know, there's no central thing like there was the radio station or MTV, where everybody kind of knew what was going on. Everything is so fragmented, you know, it's hard to know. And then the other thing that's like the only reason really, besides Nashville's an outlier, so we'll talk about that maybe in a minute, but major labels are really for people like Beyonce or Taylor Swift or you know all these big, you know. And then it's like, oh, do you like punk rock? Well, check out what's his name, Machine Gun Kelly, his new punk rock, you know. And you like country music? Well, here's Beyonce doing, you know what I mean? It's like
country standards or something.
You like Mexican food?
Yeah.
Well, check out Taco Bell. You know what I mean? Not to belittle an artist, but it's just like, it seems like everything just gets sort of just pushed into these categories, and then they're just dealt with celebrity. I think that there's going to be a major
upheaval.
Garbage, you know. And then
I think because it seems like we've just started to scratch the surface, man. But it seems like this problem, if you want to refer to it to that, in Hollywood is going to go a lot deeper than I think people even understand.
It's just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's happening right now is terrifying. I just don't even know what to think about it all.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
I don't even know what to think about it. I've been texting my friends in LA, and everything seems to be okay wherever they are. And then, like, you know, it's happening. There are fires that are destroying the entire city of Los Angeles.
Oh yeah,
but there's also this AI shit of the Hollywood sign burning down, and I bet you there's a good percentage of people that think that that's real.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? It's like, what is going on?
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to your collabs because, you know, and I've got a short list here. Obviously, we talked about Lanegan, Amy Ray, Indigo Girls. You know, you worked with Stone from Pearl Jam, Duff from Guns N' Roses or whatever. But is there anybody that's on a bucket list of people you might not even get the opportunity to? But is there anybody that you have just always thought, wow, I would love to work with that person if only if? Yeah.
I always wanted to be in Tom Waits' band.
Yeah, he's cool.
Really well in that band.
Yeah,
because some of my favorite people are in that sort of mix.
Yeah,
Mark Ribot, you know, one of my heroes. I'd really like to hang with Buddy Miller.
Yeah,
you know who that is?
No, I don't. No,
he's kind of the Nashville guy. He's like the go-to Nashville guy. Guitarist. He was the guitar player closely associated with everything that Robert Plant's been doing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like T-Bone Burnett sort of has produced those records with Alison Krauss.
Okay.
But especially in the first run of that, and then as Robert Plant kind of moved out of the Alison Krauss thing into other areas of sort of Americana music, Buddy was his guy. And he's just so cool. You know what I mean?
Are there any collabs?
At that token, I was in the same room with Robert Plant once.
That's gotta be pretty surreal. That's got to be pretty surreal.
I think that he is just one of the absolute greats of all time on so many different levels. And so, yeah.
Now, when you collaborate with people, I imagine sometimes that, it can go smoothly, or maybe it could be like an oil and water type thing or whatever. Are there any collabs that stick out to you that really just went really seamless? I mean, where even you were surprised? Like obviously you made great music with some of the people I just mentioned right there. But what was the easiest collaboration? Is there one you can talk about where it was just like, holy shit, this just seems so natural?
Well, there's a lot of those. I think that
other than your wife, obviously say your wife first if you want to stay married. That's definitely say your wife, because the internet is forever.
Even in that instance, I think that like what I kind of learned about artists, because I really try to learn as much as possible every single day about all this stuff. Outside of songwriting, when you're just talking about performing, an artist, like a front person, a singer, lead guitar player, whatever it is, somebody that you're supporting on some level, needs to feel very comfortable.
Sure.
They don't need to be looking back. What's going on back here? You know what I mean?
Right.
They need to kind of forget you're there.
Right.
Right. Until that you do something, that they might like, And I kind of learned a lot of that the hard way. And so in that instance, I've learned to play with just about anybody that I can groove with. I have to kind of like the music, and I kind of have to dig their point of view or whatever like that. And then we sort of vibe out first, just personally.
Yeah.
And then even if it's technical or something like that, I've just kind of figured out a way to, set people's mind at ease in a way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of my favorite thing, And then once you kind of get into a groove with somebody, then it becomes second nature, Sure. And it's not necessarily one person over the other or this over that, you know what I mean? As long as you're kind of on the same page and on the same wavelength, you can really groove with somebody, and that's a beautiful thing. It's like this kind of, unspoken language.
It's more about you. It's more about you than the artist you're working with. It's more about you kind of blending in.
Well, it's about you knowing what your job is,
right?
And what your sort of place in the music is. And sometimes that could be raging,
right?
That's the other thing. It's like Duff. I've been working with Duff McKagan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's taking me the other way. It's like, dude, you got to get going, get more. You know what I mean? We need more of this shit.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because that usually doesn't happen. It's usually a little less. You know what I mean? So that's been really cool. So in that instance, it's like, kick it out a little bit more forward, you know what I mean? And be more present. Like he wants people, like if you do a solo, go to the front of the stage, man. Get this going. You know what I mean?
He wants to spotlight. He wants to showcase you guys. He wants to showcase you guys and let you guys have your moment to shine. Yeah.
But it's also about the sort of just the stage presence and stuff like that. It's like
what's it like working with Duff? Because obviously we all know Duff. I mean, I know he has a solo career and he's put out some amazing solo albums. But obviously I think the average person watching this will know Duff McKagan, Guns N' Roses bass player.
Yeah.
What's it like working with? I mean, what's it like working with Duff? I mean, obviously he was in one of the biggest rock bands of all time, obviously. But you're working with him on his solo stuff, obviously.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. He's great guy.
So cool.
Yeah.
Like so cool.
Yeah.
Always
hear great things about him. Always hear great things. Mark himself has talked him up about what a great guy and a great friend he was to him.
Really? Yeah. Like Mark would have told you that Duff saved his life.
Yep.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
But yeah, Duff's a big deal, man. And he is just him. I'll say, and I'm sure that there's other people like this, but I'll say about Duff McKagan and Stone Gossard are cut out of the same sort of cloth, where they do not need to be this nice and this awesome and this inclusive with all of the people, that they surround themselves with. You know what I mean? They can play,
and unfortunately, rock stars sometimes who lose that sense of themselves. You know what I mean? These guys have always stayed grounded and stayed who they are. Yeah,
really. And Duff, and being able to work with him for this last year has just been an absolute pleasure. And we have a history. I did the film, It's So Easy concert film, and that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I worked with him way back then, and then I sort of, we sort of kept in touch a little bit. In fact, we opened with Mark Lanegan Band. We opened for Guns N' Roses.
Yes.
In 2016.
Yep.
2017 in Spain, and at Slane's Castle and stuff, and that was wild. Those were the biggest crowds I've ever played. It was 60,000 people, I think.
Yeah, and do you consider yourself, because you did mention that you did mention that at the time of his passing in the previous years before that, you had become a member of the Mark Lanegan Band. Are you part of Duff McKagan's solo band? Like, are you a member? So okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a relatively new thing. So, I don't know. I'm not gonna bank on it being a 10-year project, but it could be. He seems very into it. He really likes us, and we really take it.
His solo albums have been amazing.
Yeah. So we're recording and stuff, and I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
But one thing I've learned about super autistic people, especially people that are really successful, is that they know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Yeah. They've proven it. That they know a thing or two about a thing or two, and if they are inspired to do something, or if they're inspired to do something else, then that is their thing to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if it lasts a good long time, then I would love to play with Duff for as long as it goes around. And if he doesn't, if he finds something else to do, then that's okay too. You know what I mean? Because it's important for artists to be artists.
And now, what was it like?
Believe me.
And now, what's it like when the Mark Lanegan Band opens for Guns N' Roses? Because again, I heard Mark talk about, and again, I believe this was on Joseph Arthur's podcast, where maybe you saw it from the stage as differently, but Mark seemed to think that it did not go over well, and that the fans were not receptive to seeing you guys opening up for Guns N' Roses, and it's just kind of like, who the fuck are these guys, and when's this going to be over?
Exactly. That's exactly the way that works.
Okay.
We found out really quickly, like within 20 seconds, that we are not a stadium rock band, first of all.
Yeah.
There's all this huge stage with the platforms that go all the way around, you know what I mean, and all this stuff, and we're just kind of in the middle, not moving, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All dressed in black. And it was weird. It was just a weird scene. It just felt, and then everybody just kind of like, what is going on right now?
Well, and for people that might not know, and again, I've talked about Mark Lanegan, I've talked about his book, I've talked about, anybody who's come on here like you, like Alan Johannes, like people that have interacted with him, I'd like to pick their brain and stuff, but for people that might not know, Mark had a very unique style, whereas he wasn't a very showy, flamboyant frontman. Like you hit it on the head at the beginning, kind of stood there, a hand on the top of the microphone, a hand on the bottom of the microphone stand, and very kind of sedimentary in one spot. Yeah. So I mean, So I mean, that might not translate in a big arena rock show, as you said.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it was, we did some pretty big shows, like we did Glastonbury and stuff like that, and it was a different vibe. The Guns N' Roses thing was just, I don't know what it was. I don't know exactly what it was, but they were terrifying, and it was the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But come on, dude, we got to open for Guns N' Roses. I remember we did the first show, and it was crazy. It was raining, and it was just kind of crazy, and it was just wild, like they just got us on and got us, get out of here, and all this stuff. And it was just kind of this whirlwind of just stress and everything else. And then we were like, just get around. We go to the front, and I was with the tour manager, Remco, who's a good friend. He's a good guy. And they come out and they open with Night Train or something. They open with It's So Easy, I think. And man, I was just like, can you believe this is happening, dude?
I know. Yeah.
So it was still amazing. But as a thing to do, I could tell that Mark wasn't very pleased with the whole thing. But it was so cool. I mean, what an experience to do that,
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people don't realize, because like Guns N' Roses kind of gets labeled as another one of those Sunset Strip bands, but Duff is originally a Seattle, Washington guy.
Seattle guy.
Yeah, he's a Seattle guy. Yeah. And so let me ask you a couple of the subjective questions that I have here, man. Just to pick your brain here. So from a fan standpoint, taking yourself out of the equation as a performer, I'm sure you've attended lots of shows. Is there a performance or two by somebody that really stands out, somebody that you got to see live that really blew you away?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of that. Tom Waits I saw twice, once in the very front row, but the best show was at the Fifth Avenue Theater, which is generally a place for plays and things like that.
Yeah.
He played there in I want to say it was 2000. It was either 1999 or 2000. It was on the Mule Variations tour, and that was one of the best shows I've ever seen. It was crazy good. And then I saw Paul McCartney at the big baseball stadium here in 2000. I want to say 12 or 13, somewhere in there, kind of earlier.
Yeah.
That was amazing. We got these kind of tickets for that, like last minute for $60. I don't know how the dude pulled it off, but he was like, "Hey, let's go see Paul McCartney." And it wasn't until I got there where I was like, "Man, what?" Because I'm a huge Beatles freak. But even going to see Paul, it didn't really hit me until we're sitting there before the show and they're playing Beatles songs.
Yeah.
Really loud, just over. And I'm just like, whoa, dude.
Yeah.
See this guy.
Yeah.
We're in a stadium where they kind of invented everything. They invented cool records. They invented cool recording techniques. They invented close miking. I don't know if you know that. There was never close mics cello before. Eleanor Rigby, They invented stadium shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
They invented the whole thing, the music business, in a lot of ways, and there he is singing Helter Skelter right in front of us.
Crazy.
And he never took a drink of water. He never hit a bad note. The band was super for real. It was so good. That was a great show.
Now it seems like you've gotten the chance to rub elbows with a lot of people, though, and I hate to use the word starstruck when we're talking about adults and acting like a fanboy or whatever. But but has there been anybody that you've had an opportunity to meet where it really kind of blew you away?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Obviously, you said being in a room with Robert Plant. That's pretty crazy.
Robert Plant, but I didn't really meet him. He was just there. But he did it was at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, and he had to get by me. Like there's a really small area to get out of the back door, and I was standing right there. So he had to get by me like really close, and his face is all leathery, and it was like right there. That was something. But I didn't hang out. I didn't meet him. I got to play with and meet Joe Walsh.
That's cool. That's a good
Billy
one.
Gibbons.
Yeah.
And Chrissy Hine. And that was heavy. It was heavy hanging out with those kind of folks, what I mean? Because it's just so much. Talk about inventing it all. Joe Walsh is super cool too.
Yeah.
He was a cool guy. He was cool to meet. He was nice and everything. But he's just cool, like his aura and everything he's done. I'm a huge fan,
Has there been opportunities where you've met people, and of course, you work in the industry, so I wouldn't want you to mention anybody's name specifically. But has there been a time when you've met somebody that you've worshipped where it's been a letdown?
Not that I liked. I've never met. There's never been somebody that I was like a big fan of, and then I'm like, oh, what a bummer. That guy was cool. What I mean? But there has been people that are like famous, that are like around that I'm just like, no, man, come on. That's happened more than once.
Yeah.
But whatever, everybody's got their thing, I get it. It's all good. But yeah, that's yes.
What about let me ask you this question, and I feel like you'll have a definitive answer. Some of my guests let this marinate around in their head for a little bit. Some of them really have to wrestle with it. But if I were to take Jeff Fielder and drop him on a desert island, and he can only take one fucking album, what would be the desert island album? And I know that I know that's a really fucking shitty thing to do to people, but I do it almost every episode. So
it'd have to be something that is probably Ray Charles, something like that, something like Easy, you know what I mean, and real cool and real bluesy, and just something real chill. So it's like something you can get into. Yeah. And even kind of dance to and sing along to. And then also something that can just kind of be on and your life can just go.
Right. Well, talking about a guy like
But I couldn't like listen to death and shit every day. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Talking about a guy like Ray Charles, though, man. In the music industry right now, man. And again, I talked about it earlier. There's such an influx of stuff on the streaming platforms. You said it yourself. It's easy to get your music out there nowadays. How successful it is and how popular it becomes is a different story, man. But you talk about these guys that you mentioned a lot of them, the Paul McCartneys, the Billy Gibbons or whatever. Are we going to continue to see real bona fide rock stars, man, or is that era kind of starting to fade out? Like, I mean, where we really see these iconic people, like where you think about like what a spectacle it was to see Elvis in concert, or these showmen, or these real people, these people like your Jimi Hendrixes, these people that really cement themselves as bona fide, rock gods.
Yeah. I think that in general is sort of done with, you know what I mean? Having said that, let's see. Let me think, because there's certain people that come to mind. Like we were talking about before about this sort of deconstruction of celebrity.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be very famous. I think I've done a fine job at doing that too. Because I think it seems like once you hit a certain level, then it's like build you up just people love to watch people crash,
Yeah.
And it seems like the higher you get, the more reckless people become. And then people just love to watch the downfall of somebody.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just ugly to me, man. I really don't. I really have a distaste for all that stuff. I think it's gross.
Yeah.
On the other hand, proper musicians, I think there's two people I think of because when I saw them, it was like when people say, "Oh, I got to see Hendrix," or "I got to see Led Zeppelin." You're like, "Oh, cool,"
Yeah.
It's Derek Trucks, watching Derek Trucks play guitar right in front of you.
Amazing.
And John 5. I remember the first time we did it for whatever reason. The last year that we toured with Mark, the management wanted us to do metal festivals.
Yeah.
They thought that would be the new avenue to go down. So we did all these heavy metal festivals, which I thought was fun. I didn't think it was quite the right audience for us, but it was cool. It was fun for me though, because I love all that stuff.
Yeah.
And Rob Zombie played, and John 5 was his guitarist. And I remember thinking, it was like, this is like seeing Randy Rhoads, man, back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's so incredibly incredible. And there he is. He's young and he's influential.
It almost seems like he's overqualified to
be the curtain of the whole celebrity culture, and more like amazing. Like Billy Strings is one too.
Yes.
Yeah. And so those guys are going to go down as legends, man. Yeah. But the whole like larger than life David Bowie's and the Jimmy Page and all that kind of thing, I don't necessarily see it because there's no focused place for it to exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's much more fragmented, But yeah, Billy Strings, Derek Trucks, John 5, those guys.
It's like I see John 5 now doing the Motley Crue thing, and it almost makes me laugh because I almost feel like he's overqualified.
He's way overqualified.
He's overqualified.
I don't know about all that, man. I dig Motley Crue or whatever, but that's a funny gig, man, for him. But he's playing the big rooms every night.
Yeah,
so there's that.
As somebody who does this for a living, man, like, what do you think about like when we see these legendary, and it's got to be tough for an artist nowadays, man, because you do see a lot of people turning out to live gigs. They're pulling out their cell phones and they're recording stuff, but it seems like they're taking it home. They're putting it up on YouTube just to kind of play armchair music critic and really ripping these guys down. They don't have the chops anymore. Oh, look, they're using backing tracks or these tricks or whatever, or what I mean? It seems like it's a very tough, it seems like it's a very tough time, to be an artist, because it seems like everyone, like you said, it just wants to watch you go down in flames.
Isn't it weird?
Yeah.
I've been a part of a couple things recently where, like, I did the disservice to myself of looking at some comments. Which are normally, 90% positive, but there's always somebody.
Always.
Who's this joker? Yeah. I remember blah, 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 blah. This guy sucks and blah, blah, this and this. And it just sticks. It just sticks in your head for weeks, man. I can't get it out of my head. So I couldn't imagine having to deal with that like constantly. And I could see why people just don't read the comments and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, there's so many. That question there's a lot there because the cell phone thing, I get it, but does anybody watch this when they go home? I mean, we went to a Christmas parade recently with the kid,
Yeah.
And here comes the Santa Claus guy, and you couldn't see the Santa Claus guy for all of the phones in the air.
Right.
And I'm like, do you go home and watch the parade again?
That's footage. Right. I like even myself, I've gone to concerts and I get a snippet or like a piece of a song that I really, really love. And then I get home and I think, what am I going to do with this? I've got this on my, yeah, I've got this on my phone.
And then on the other side of that, there's people like there's shows that me and Mark did that the whole show is up there. So that guy had his phone up there the whole
time. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, thank God that guy had that whole show.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be there without that, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know.
And now, before I let you out of here, though, man, your last solo album was "Trouble in Time" in 2021, man. So I certainly want to go into promotion mode here and let you kind of speak on like what you've currently got going, man, or like what's coming up for you.
Well, we're gonna do some stuff with Duff, and we'll see if hopefully that will come out at some time. The Duff is awesome, and the music is really cool. That was some fun recording sessions because we went in right after the tour. We toured for like 2 months and then just went in the studio with kind of like these really rough. They weren't even demos. They were just like, here's some chords and that, and then just like cranked out these really cool tunes out of them. So the band works really good as a band, but also like we can make these great arrangements out of this stuff, so.
And so what are you in right now? You're in the Duff McKagan Band? Because I know for a while he was calling it Loaded.
No, Loaded is a different thing. Yeah, this is Duff's solo. So it's just called Duff McKagan. Okay. And it's very roots oriented, it's kind of very heartfelt kind of songs and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is great. There's a little punk element to some of it, there's always going to be, but he's really letting it out. I think it's great. I'm working with my wife, Tekla. We're making a new record.
Yep.
I'm working with an artist named Stephanie Ann Johnson. We're making a really cool record right now. There's a lot of things kind of juggling. Constantly working with Amy Ray, who's one of my dear friends.
Yeah.
And so we'll probably start working on some new material here pretty soon. What else? I work with Ryan Hadlock out of Bear Creek, and that's where I got to play with Zach Bryan. And there's a ton of these Nashville artists that are coming to Seattle to work.
Oh, that's Ryan. Cool.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So there's a ton of that stuff. And I couldn't even tell you exactly where to look for it, but there is a ton of it. So yeah, there's always a lot going on.
So you will be busy. And so where's the best place if people like what Jeff Fielder does? Where's the best place to stay tapped into you? Website, Instagram, you gotta pimp yourself out here, Jeff.
I should get a little bit better with that. I have a decent website, but I need to kind of revamp it all, you know what I mean? But if you want to kind of know what's happening in the moment, as of right now, it's Instagram and Facebook. But like we talked about, I'm not exactly sure how this is all going to land. So maybe I'll get one of those Blue Sky. I haven't even seen it. I don't even know what Blue Sky looks like. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's just this scrolling thingy. You know what I mean? I'm not all that into it, but you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah. You do.
So we'll see. It's gonna be an interesting few years, I think.
Well, it does. It does suck because obviously I'm 51 years old, and doing this podcast, I got to have some place, some type of a forum to say, hey, there's new episodes up on my YouTube channel. There's got to be some place to kind of announce that or whatever. So I play ball with Facebook too, but I try not to be on all of them. I mean, it gets too hard to keep up with them all personally.
Yeah, and it's like it's not very fun anymore. I think that there's sort of political reasons that people are pissed off at Facebook, but I think the main thing is that you look at it and it's nothing to do with anything except for ads. They're trying to sell you something,
or just like everybody, as you said earlier, people showing you what they're eating, or people giving you their views on politics or their opinions, even if nobody asked. You know what I mean?
But even outside of that, it's like a bunch of like sponsored sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And a bunch of shit that I don't, I know like what you know, the cast of Wicked is up to. Why do I care about any of that? You know?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's weird. You know?
But listen, Jeff, man, it was a real pleasure, man. It really was great talking to you, man. I you know, now that we're in touch, please stay in touch. I'd love to have you back.
Absolutely,
on. It was really fun chopping it up with you, man. Yeah, it was a great time and a real pleasure meeting you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you doing this, man. I'm really a huge fan, man, and I really appreciate, you know, all the Mark Lanegan stories and anecdotes, man, because I am a huge fan. He's probably the only person that my wife will let me hang a poster in our bedroom next to our bed.
Cool.
I have a poster of Mark. I have two down there, Mark Lanegan and Lane Staley, and that's it.
What are the posters?
It's Mark Lanegan. It's back in the day, and I meant to ask Gary Lee Conner because I've had him on the podcast twice. It's an old shot. They're playing in some place with one of those drop ceilings. A lot of water stains on there. Mark is very, very young in there. You can just see maybe Gary Lee Conner's leg and a part of his guitar. It's mostly focused on Mark, but he's very, very young. He's in flannel. You know, long hair, very long, very youthful, man. But he's still got the same thing, still holding the microphone stand the same way, man. But you know, that's kind of how I like to remember him. Although I do really like the older, grizzled Mark, though.
Yeah, there was a video he did with Joe, Skeleton Joe, you know, Joe Carmon.
Yep.
Did you see it where he's in the studio and they're about to do a vocal? I can't remember the song, but there's a whole prelude to where he's sitting there looking at his phone.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yep.
That little piece is the closest anybody will ever come that didn't know Mark to knowing what he was really like.
Yeah. I think I saw that. I think I saw that once, man. But do you know exactly where to find that? Because I would love to see that again.
It's up there somewhere. Just look up Joe Cardamon and Mark Lanegan. It'll come up, and he's just sitting in the studio, and he's about to do a vocal, but he's looking at his phone, and he's like, I think he's looking at the lyrics, and he goes like, he said, I saw this guy at a festival, and he was reading the lyrics off his phone, like on stage. Not a good look. But it's so the way he says it and the way he like sitting and stuff like that, that's the way he was in real life. And it was awesome because I've never seen anything that besides that clip that's like really like him, like the way he was.
Thank God, you know, thank God before his untimely passing, man, that he got that memoir out though, man. I mean, you know, that memoir, it really just feels like, you know what I mean? It really feels like, you know, you're conversationally there with Mark and he's really just giving you the goods on his whole fucking life. You know what I mean? And I know that was probably, as I said, I seen him talk about it in interviews. I know that wasn't an easy kind of bloodletting for him or whatever, man. So that, you know, the fact that he gave us that piece of himself, you know, really speaks volumes, man. Cause I know that couldn't have been easy for him revisiting a lot of that, especially like especially touching on a lot of the family stuff and his own personal family and stuff. Those couldn't have been easy places for him to go. Yeah.
And he wrote that book himself.
Yeah. Yeah. You can tell.
And he wasn't the best type. I mean, that shit took years to get, you know, really together and like proofread it and get it all through. He did all that stuff himself. I mean, they had editors and stuff like that, like overlook things, you know, and everything. Yeah. But there was no anywhere near a ghostwriter. He typed that whole thing out on his beat up laptop, man. You know what I mean? Yeah. That was really something. And we were with him that whole time. It was a trip. Yeah.
I appreciate you so much, Jeff, man. This was really a treat, man. I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Good talking to you, Jeff.
All right, brother. Down the line.
Hey, brother.
Yes, sir.
There he goes, folks. Jeff Fielder, guitarist from the Mark Lanegan Band, and now Duff Lanegan. But I just really call him Duff Lanegan. Has it been that long of a day where I mixed Duff and Lanegan together? Now playing with the great Duff McKagan in his fucking solo band. Let me reiterate. Duff McKagan, and previously the Mark Lanegan Band, and of course does amazing stuff with his wife Tekla Waterfield, and some amazing solo albums as well. His last one was Trouble in Time in 2021, and done amazing collaborations with Amy from the Indigo Girls. He's obviously, I said he's worked with Duff, with Lanegan, with Stoney from Pearl Jam. So get tapped in, man. Jeff, man, a super talented guy, man. Played on a lot of those Mark Lanegan albums, and of course live with him for many, many years. And great to hear Mark Lanegan stories, man. I mean, me being a huge Mark Lanegan fan, man, that's a treat for me, man. So really appreciate Jeff Fielder being on here, man. Really enjoyed that conversation, man. Obviously, he's got a lot coming up on his plate. Obviously, he continues to work with Amy from Indigo Girls, doing stuff with his wife, doing the stuff with Duff. So it sounds like he's always in the mix, always got stuff going on, man. So you can tap in with him on the social medias or his website, Jeff Fielder. Go check out what he does, man. His last solo album, absolutely beautiful, man. Just an amazing artist, man. And really appreciate him coming on here, man. And I'm going to stop and give myself a look, because before he got on here, I didn't get a chance to check out my Rockstar good looks. Let me make sure that after an hour plus conversation, they haven't gone to hell. Who am I kidding? I've got Rockstar genetics on my side, folks. These looks don't go to hell, but I still want to stop, take a time out, and admire the view. Yep. And of course, as a true product of the 80s, when I do need a little help getting the coif in order, it might be a new year, but it's the same old product, kids. You can help add to the hole in the ozone layer, and you can step up your game levels with a couple of spritzes of this stuff, man. Now, the caveat is you will never look this good because, as I said, Rockstar genes. It's damn near impossible to look this damn good. But, as I said, you will step up your game. Leaps and bounds, folks. That being said, man, thank you for tuning in to another episode of PodScum with your boy, Reckless Rex Ruger, and, of course, the Freddie Mercury puppet, who once again said absolutely nothing. But if you're expecting him to, what the fuck is wrong with you? He's a puppet. He's there to watch my back, and you're there to watch his teeth because you can't miss him. That being said, man, make sure to like and follow PodScum on Facebook for updates on new episodes and who will be on said episodes other than yours truly, which really is all the entertainment that you need. But I know you tune in for the guests, man. And you know your boy Rexx always fucking delivers. And today was no different. An amazing chat with the great Jeff Fielder, man. This is what you've come to expect. Kick-ass episodes and amazing conversations on PodScum. And if you're here watching right now, make sure to like, subscribe, smash that notification bell. This is the place to be, man. Again, a big thank you, man, as we're 13 days into this new year at the time of this recording. Thank you to my subscribers. The podcast has been growing. The views are always on upward trajectory. The trends are always upwards. The subscribers are turning out. So thank you to all you guys, man, for your support. And of course, a big thank you and a big debt of gratitude to all my guests who come on here and chop it up with me, man. Couldn't do it without you guys, man. I appreciate each and every single one of you, man. So make sure to stay tapped in. And before I get out of here, you know how I end these things. As I said, it might be a new year, but it is the same old saying, and that is, remember to take it easy and keep it sleazy.